Mwalele po, Vanave Africa. Welcome to the final show of Africa Good Morning of 2021. We are talking 300 rather, and 6 episode, and we are so excited.
Yes, we are. Indeed, it's been a wonderful, wonderful journey, and thank you for staying with us through it all. Today is also Eggnog Day.
Yes.
Interesting. Eggnog is historically also known as milk punch or egg milk punch when it is mixed with an alcoholic beverage. It's a rich, chilled, creamy, and sweetened dairy drink traditionally created with milk and or cream, sugar, whipped eggs, which helps it gain its frothy texture and sometimes mixed with spirits. Interesting. I might try that. I might try that tonight.
I might try it too, if you make it.
Yeah, there we go. let's look at this video on Eggnog Day.
Welcome back. In our top stories this morning, Libyan election collapses with no plan out of crisis. Libya's parliament said Friday's planned presidential election would not go ahead, leaving the internationally backed peace process in chaos and the fate of the interim government in doubt. The Electoral Commission proposed pushing back the voting date by a month, confirming a delay that had been widely expected amid disputes over the rules, including the eligibility of several divisive candidates. Disagreements showed the limitation of the winner-takes-all presidential vote involving candidates viewed as unacceptable in large parts of the country, including the son of late ruler Muammar Gaddafi and a military leader who was assaulted in Tripoli. At stake is a peace process that had been seen as the best hope in years of bringing an end to the decades of chaos and violence that has engulfed Libya since a NATO-backed uprising ousted Gaddafi in 2011.
In our second story, Sudan's Prime Minister Hamdok intends to resign within hours, according to sources. Sudan Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok has told a group of national political and intellectual figures that he intends to resign in the coming hours. Two sources close to Hamdok told Reuters on Tuesday. Hamdok was reinstated on 21 November following a coup a month earlier that saw the military take power and end a transitional partnership with political parties. While several political forces took part in drafting the agreement, according to the sources, it has faced widespread criticism from parties and the general public. On Saturday, hundreds of thousands of people marched on the presidential palace, rejecting both military rule and Hamdok's decision to return, which he had said he took to preserve gains made during the transition and to end bloodshed. In a statement over the weekend, Hamdok said Sudan was inching towards the abyss, blaming political intransigence and lack of consensus on a new political agreement. The group Hamdok spoke to on Tuesday called on him to stay in his position, but he insisted he would leave, the sources added.
Tigrayan fighters announced they are withdrawing from the rest of Ethiopia. The Tigrayan People's Liberation Front said its forces will be returning to Tigray. The group's head said the move will be a decisive opening for peace. The leaders of the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front announced on Monday that its forces would be withdrawing from a number of areas in Ethiopia and returning to Tigray. We trust that our bold act of withdrawal will be a decisive opening for peace, wrote Debreastage Gabriel Michael, the head of TPLF, in a letter to the United Nations. A party spokesperson, Getachew Reda, said on Twitter that the withdrawal had been completed in 2 regions and accused the international community of being slow to take action against Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed and what he called his regional partner in crime. We have just completed the withdrawal of our forces from both Amhara and Afar region, he tweeted.
In our next story, the bittersweet reality of intra-African migration. Africans are getting around their continent in even greater numbers these days, but the poor treatment many receive in some countries casts a shadow over the prospects for integration. African Union figures show that the level of intra-African migration rose from 13.3 million to 25.4 million between 2008 and 2017. A 2020 IOM report confirms that 80% of Africans responding to a 2017 survey said they had no interest in leaving the continent. We really have a very incomplete picture of the most recent trends and mainly also the number of people moving across countries. Rango Matsia of the IOM's Global Migration Data Analysis Center told DW. The causes for such massive movement of people across African countries range from economic reasons to the need for security, and there is a huge prospect that intra-African migration will continue to increase, according to Marzia. Long before the creation of colonial borders, Africans moved within the continent and beyond. The Global Compact for Safe, Orderly and Regular Migration, which was adopted in December 2018 by most UN member states, has 23 objectives. The first is improving data for evidence-based policies and for informed public debate about migration, said IOM's Marzia. Accurate data can help significantly in overcoming anti-immigration sentiments so that better cooperation can be established. The importance in ensuring safe migration and so protecting migrants at every step of the journey, protecting human rights, Marzia explained.
Tunisia court sentences ex-president Marzouki to prison in absentia. A Tunisian court on Wednesday issued a verdict in absentia sentencing former President Monsef Marzouki to 4 years in prison after he criticized President Kais Saied and called for protest. The court found against Marzouki on charges of assaulting the external security of state, according to the state's news agency TAP. Marzouki, who lives in Paris, has described Said's seizure of power in July as a coup, called for protests against him, and urged all the major international meetings of French-speaking countries to be moved from Tunisia. Said has rejected the accusation of his seizure of power, suspension of parliament, and plans to change the constitutions are a coup. He said he acted to end protracted political paralysis and that the referendum will be held next year on a new constitution, followed by parliamentary elections.
South African health regulator approves J&J COVID-19 boosters. South Africa's health regulator on Thursday approved the use of Johnson & Johnson vaccine for a second dose or booster, paving the way for the shot widely used in South Africa to shore up protection against the Omicron variant. The country already announced in December that it was preparing to offer people booster doses of both the Pfizer and J&J shots, but it did not specify when J&J boosters would be available. J&J boosters have so far only been available for health workers, while Pfizer boosters are set to be introduced from January for people who had their second dose 6 months ago or more. South Africa has relied heavily on the two companies' shots in its vaccination campaign, which had given 44% of its adult population at least one dose of a COVID-19 vaccine earlier this month. That is more than many African countries, but well short of the government's year-end target.
Nigeria destroys 1 million donated AstraZeneca vaccines with short shelf life. Nigeria on Wednesday destroyed more than 1 million doses of expired AstraZeneca vaccine in a bid to assure a wary public that they have been taken out of circulation. The destruction came more than a week after health authorities said some COVID-19 doses donated by rich Western nations had a shelf life that left only weeks to administer the shots. Reuters reported on the 7th of December that around 1 million COVID-19 vaccines were estimated to have expired in Nigeria in November without being abused. At a dam site in Abuja, a bulldozer crushed AstraZeneca shots that were packed in cardboard boxes and plastic as reporters and health officials watched.
Death toll from Madagascar boat sinking climbs to 83. The death toll from the sinking of a cargo ship off the coast of northeastern Madagascar rose to 83 on Wednesday as bad weather ended the search for 5 missing passengers, the maritime agency said. The ship, which was not authorized to take passengers, was overloaded and water flooded the engine before it sank on Monday, said Mami Randriana Voni, Director of Operations at Sea at the Maritime and River Port Agency. 50 survivors have been found, APMF said. The search for the 5 remaining missing passengers would resume on Thursday. Another passenger from the helicopter, a mechanic, was also found alive. 2 other passengers are unaccounted for.
Namibia, first impact of oil exploration in the Okavango Basin. The activities of the Canadian oil exploration company Recon Africa are being questioned in the Kavango Basin in Namibia. An investigation by the American media outlet National Geographic has revealed that the company has been operating without authorization on key sites, to the great displeasure of wildlife and the populations who are already paying the price of climate change. An investigation by National Geographic questions Recon Africa's approach to clearing land and conducting test drilling before obtaining use permits. According to the same source, the oil company uses water and disposes of it without a permit. In Namibia, community reserves account for more than 20% of the country's land. In this sense, biologists say that a large scale of oil development in the region could harm elephant and other wildlife in the Kampinga Kamwalye Reserve operated by Recon Africa.
In the last of our top stories, China commits to wildlife protection in Africa. Africa and China will strengthen their cooperation in wildlife protection and support the improvement of the conservation capacity of African countries. This is one of the resolutions of the 7th Forum for China-Africa Cooperation, which was held from 29 to 30 November 2021 in Dakar, Senegal. Since its inception in 2000, FOCAC has been the highest platform for China-Africa trade and investment dialogue. It includes African countries that have diplomatic relations with Beijing. It meets every 3 years and decides on action plans and associated work programs for the next 3 years. The environmental component of FOCAC 2022 to 2025 focuses on protecting Africa's biodiversity. Pangolin scales and rhino horns are used in traditional medicine, mainly in China and Vietnam, and ivory as well as rhino horns are in high demand in China and elsewhere in the world to fashion sculptures. The international NGO Environmental Investigation Agency has expressed serious concerns about the growing demand for traditional Chinese medicine from Africa. In its latest report, the British organization estimates that a growing demand for treatments based on elements extracted from the bodies of wild animals will further accelerate the decline of biodiversity. All right, that brings us to the end of our top stories. After the break, we're going to be looking at the African origins of Christmas. I'm sure you're just as curious as we are. Stick around.
What do you think about this one, babe?
Let me go now.
You're the best.
Can I go now?
Sweetie, you're just getting started.
1 second, babe. I'm on the phone. Yeah. What do you think about this one, babe? Babe? What did he say?
Tomorrow is Christmas. In the next video, cultural historian, author, artist, and educator Anthony Browder summarizes the African origins of Christmas. Browder is the founder and director of IKG Cultural Resources and has devoted 30 years researching ancient Egyptian history, science, philosophy, and culture. His 3 decades of study have led him to the conclusion that ancient Africans were the architects of civilization and developed the rudiments of what has become the scientific, religious, and philosophical backbone of mankind. It is from this framework that IKG has concentrated its research and disseminated its findings. Let's have a look.
Well, generally what we consider to be holidays were, in fact, holy days in Africa, specifically in ancient Kemet, Egypt, Nile Valley culture and civilization. And these holy days were timed to coincide with the relationship between specific celestial phenomena in the heavens, stars, constellations, the sun, and planet Earth. And that relationship literally affects everything on the planet. And because there was a specific impact on the way that the Earth's relationship to the sun, as it revolves around the sun, affects everything on the Earth, that specific times for certain holy celebrations were organized. So this season, this winter season, is a time where we're approaching the winter solstice, which is the shortest day of the year. And we have celebrations now, Hanukkah, Festival of Lights. We have Christmas with Christmas lights. These lights refer to the fact that on the winter solstice, which is the shortest day of the year, a day in which in the northern hemisphere we have 19 hours of night. And then the winter solstice spans from 4 days, December the 21st through the 24th. And then after that 4-day period of time, then the sun is born on December the 25th. That is, the length of the day begins to increase by approximately 1 minute per day. And that time frame was viewed in ancient Africa as the birth of the sun, the S-U-N. In other cultures or traditions, that tradition came down to us as the birth of a savior who was viewed as the Son of God. But many of the traditions that we now find in Christianity, for example, the birth of Jesus on December the 25th, the birth of Jesus in a stable, all refer to specific phenomena that were happening in the heavens and were acknowledged by Africans in Kemet in the Nile Valley over 6,000 years ago. We know this because we can look up in the sky at night and we can see specifically a constellation of Orion dominates the nighttime sky. And the constellation of Orion was known to the ancient Egyptians as Sahu. That was a constellation associated with a primary deity by the name of Asar or Osiris. He was the lord of resurrection. And according to the story, Asar was murdered by his brother. And after his death, his spirit came and impregnated his virgin wife, Set, who then 9 months later gave birth to their son Heru on December the 25th. Now this story sounds familiar because it's an African story that's over 6,000 years old. Heru was born on December the 25th, the same birthday as his father. He was born to avenge the murder of his father and restore his father's kingdom. So this is a story, this is a myth that was a metaphor to help explain specific phenomena that were happening in heaven. So the priests in ancient Kemet were aware of this phenomena, and they in turn created rituals that will allow the people to maintain a certain system of order. After foreigners came into Kemet, they adopted many of the traditions of the Nile Valley, and they adopted many of the personalities and changed their names. So Asar was renamed Osiris, Aset was renamed Isis, Heru was renamed Horus. And then that story is a story that is later modified after the Romans conquered Egypt in 30 BCE, took Egypt away from the Greeks, and they then took these same personalities and they were known to their people as the Madanian child, the black Madanian child. And ultimately, when Rome began to establish Christianity as the state religion, they then took this story of Asar, who is known as the Lord of Resurrection, and his son Heru, and morphed them into the religion that we now know as Christianity, with the birth of Jesus on December the 25th. So we can break this phenomena down to precise detail, because December the 25th is the birth of the sun, S-U-N, when the length of the day begins to increase by approximately 1 minute per day. At the moment of the birth of the sun, the constellation of Orion is in the constellation known as Sagittarius, or which was known in ancient times as the stable of Aegeus. So it was said that the sun was born in a stable. There are 3 stars in the belt of Orion, which makes this constellation so readily identifiable. And those 3 stars point to the eastern star, which we now know today as Sirius. Sirius is the star system that was associated with Aset, the wife of Asar, the mother of Heru. And so in ancient times in Kemet, those 3 stars in the belt of Orion, or Sahu, were known as the 3 wise men, or the 3 kings. The eastern star, or Set, rises in the east around the time of the birth of the sun on December the 25th. And at the same time that eastern star is rising, it is rising in the constellation of Virgo, the Virgin. And so it was said then that the sun is born of a virgin, because the constellation of Virgo is halfway above the horizon, literally being bisected by the horizon. So the sun was said to have been born of a virgin. So this was a metaphor, if you will, for celestial phenomenon that determined specific things that were happening on earth. Others appropriated this knowledge and then incorporated it into their religious system and changed the names of these original mythological personalities. So we now know, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the celebration of December the 25th as the birth of Jesus was a celebration that did not come into existence until at least 350 years after the birth of Christ. It was a result of conferences and meetings that were held by Constantine and Theodosius in order to hammer out the basic traditions of what would be the official state religion of the Holy Roman Empire. And no minister, no theologian today worth their salt can tell you with honesty that Jesus was born on December the 25th. Nobody knows the date that Jesus was born. That date was appropriated because for thousands of years prior to the birth of Jesus, that date, December the 25th, had been celebrated as the birth of the sun, the S-U-N. Well, let's be clear, Egypt is in Africa. There's no such thing as the Middle East. That was a term that came into common use during the early 20th century. And it was a term that was used to geographically and historically remove Egypt from the continent of Africa, thus removing the history of African people from the continent as well. Egypt is a Greek word, as are many of the terms that are used to describe the accomplishments of African people. Egypt is a Greek word. Sphinx is a Greek word. Pyramid is a Greek word. So one of the things that I'm always stressing is the importance of identifying African people, places, and things by their original names. The original name for Egypt is Kemet. Kemet is a word which means the nation of the black people. Kemet is the oldest documented civilization known to mankind. And I've been traveling to Egypt over 51 times during the last 35 years, studying this history inside and out. And I can say beyond a shadow of a doubt that that culture, that ancient culture, the oldest documented civilization known to mankind, was established by indigenous African people, and all of the major accomplishments which we now associate with Egypt were developed by indigenous Africans. And it wasn't until after Kemet was conquered by the Greeks, Alexander of Macedonia in 332 BC, that Kemet became Egypt. So most of the stories or images that we see of the ancient Egyptians are false images. And it has to do with the continued distortion of African history, culture, and the people associated with African history and culture. Myths are important because myths transcend time and space, they transcend personalities. And they're ways of incorporating the essence of a people into a phenomenon. Myths are not true, but they contain truth. Every culture has their foundational myths, which serves as the foundation for their culture. And what we have found as African people living here in the West is that our memory has been erased and the erasure has been forgotten, and others have been telling our story and have, as Dr. John Henry Clark said, written us out of the respectable commentary of human history. And so we look, for example, at ancient Kemetic or ancient Egyptian symbols that have been taken all over the world, but most people don't know that they're African, and they don't know what they mean. For example, the Washington Monument is a structure 555 feet tall, the tallest structure in Washington, D.C., and it's a structure that actually represents the resurrection of an ancient African king by the name of Asar. That symbol is the oldest symbol of resurrection known to mankind. It represents the resurrection of an African man. So why don't people know that information? It certainly is available to anyone who's willing to do the research. And we have to ask a question, what else don't we know? So one of the things that prompted me to begin an in-depth study of African history, and more specifically Nile Valley history and culture, is that most of what we know about that culture has been falsified by the people who were responsible for enslaving our ancestors. And I know beyond a shadow of a doubt that truth is a means of restoring a people's consciousness. So our people, people of African ancestry in Baltimore, in my hometown Chicago, in New York, behave the way that we behave because we have been socialized to believe that our history began in slavery. We don't know our true story, and that there have been concerted efforts over the centuries to deny us the opportunity to tell our story. My daughter wrote her first book when she was 8 years old, My First Trip to Africa. And a young man in Maryland had written a book report on my daughter's book. And the book detailed her trip to Egypt, the trip that she made when she was 7 years old. This young man was reprimanded by his teacher because his book report was entitled My First Trip to Africa, and the book report was about Egypt, and everyone knows that Egypt is not in Africa. Now that happened 20 years ago. So this disconnect of African history, people, and culture from the continent is still occurring, and that's why it's so critically important that we document our story and that we share it with anyone who has a mind and heart to listen and learn.
Welcome back to Africa. Good morning. The festive season is known to be a time in which road safety becomes a significant factor in the safety of individuals. Namibia has seen the loss of more than a dozen of lives on its roads over the festive season, and South Africa mourns the loss of a provincial inspector who was knocked down by a car while he was on duty. We take a look at the state of the roads over the festive season.
Good morning to you guys in studio. So I'm greeting you from the lovely Swakopmund this morning, and today we're going to be chatting a little bit about road safety, specifically in Namibia and South Africa, where road safety are, in both those countries, it's quite a big issue. So Namibia and South Africa are two separate countries in which road safety becomes a significant headache for authorities during the festive season. South Africa has made numerous attempts at changing the driver attitudes in South Africa, including the Arrive Alive campaign, but it doesn't seem to have changed too much for them, as Zutobi, an international drivers education company, ranked them last on a sample of 56 countries in a road safety According to Zutobi, South Africa ranked highest in the number of deaths pertaining to drunken driving, at 57.5% of road deaths being attributed to drunken driving, putting the Republic of Ireland in a far second at about 38%. For interest's sake, the safest countries in the world to drive, according to the Zutobi study, are Norway, Japan, and Sweden. Obviously, they didn't survey all the countries in the world. South Africa was actually the only African country to be included in this study. So South Africa also ranked the second highest death rates in relation to traffic accidents of the 56 countries in the Zutobi study. And in figures released by Dial Direct, we can see a little bit, or we can learn a little bit more about the truths of South African driving and driver attitudes, things like that. So the Dial Direct study compared data from thousands of drivers obtained through Dial Direct's telematics app between 2019 and 2021. So this also gives us a nice idea of how driving has changed in South Africa and how the road conditions have changed in South Africa during the pandemic. So this study by Dial Direct showed that for every kilometer driven in 2021, drivers are 40% more likely to be involved in an accident than in 2019, which was pre-pandemic. So this very nice encapsulates how driver attitudes in South Africa have changed during the pandemic. The data revealed that during lockdown periods, the percentage of people who drove above the speed limit almost doubled. We also found that driving above the speed limit makes you 80% more likely to be involved in an accident. BizNews reports Annelie Retief, the head of Dial Direct Insurance, to have said. This is also attributed to the fact that there were fewer cars on the roads during lockdown. So some nice statistics from this Dial Direct study. It showed that using your cell phone while driving makes you twice as likely to be involved in an accident. Driving at night after the sun has gone down when it's dark makes you 60% more likely to be involved in an accident. And those who drive correctly, drive properly, drive responsibly, they are 51% less likely to be involved in a car accident. So South Africa is also currently mourning the loss of Mudan Motlako, a regional inspector there who was knocked down by a vehicle on the N4 road near Dinokana in the northwest province of South Africa. So the Minister of Transport, Fikile Mbalula, has also said that drunken driving, speeding and reckless or negligent driving have been major factors in the festive season on the South African roads. He also notes a 142% spike in crashes with multiple fatalities in South Africa. This was at his mid-festive season report of the traffic conditions. So the crashes with multiple fatalities increased to 17 this year, which is up from 7 last year. So that's quite a chilling statistic there. And then over to Namibia after a very, very chilling multiple fatality crash in which 18 people have lost their lives. Road accidents in Namibia would not end as multiple of them still followed. So the chief traffic officer at the Walvis Bay municipality, Mr. Eben Platt, says that our main problem is that people skip traffic signals. The road between Walvis Bay and Swakopmund, which are both coastal towns, which are both now at the center of where Namibians are coming to have their holiday. The road between Walvis Bay and Swakopmund has clear indications, but people overtake on barrier lines and at a very high speed. It will not be tolerated. He goes on a little bit sassily to say, young guys with fast cars, the speed limit is 120, not 320. So on that note, please, please, please be safe on your roads wherever you are traveling. There is no point in you making all this effort, doing all this planning all these expenditures, if you are not going to arrive at your destination. There's no point in trying to visit your family and friends if you do not arrive. So please arrive alive, take care. It's not just your life that you are putting at risk when you drive irresponsibly, it's the lives of the other people on the road. So at the end of the day, driving responsibly is not your decision to make. So please, please, please be safe. We'd love to see you on Africa Good Morning next year.
It is, of course, the Christmas weekend. Now, aside from being able to reunite with our loved ones, something we'd all appreciate is some good weather. So let's check out the forecast up next. Thank you for staying with Africa Good Morning. It's time for us to get into your economic news stories. And we start off in Zambia, as Zambia expects to agree debt restructuring with creditors by mid-2022. Zambia expects to agree a debt restructuring plan with creditors around the middle of next year after reaching a preliminary understanding for a program with the International Monetary Fund, Finance Minister Situmbeko Musoko-Twane said on Thursday. The International Monetary Fund and Zambia this month reached a staff-level agreement on a $1.4 billion three-year extended credit facility, bringing the heavily indebted copper producer one step closer to a comprehensive debt overhaul. Musoko-Twane said Zambia's economy was in debt distress, and the relative stability that it had experienced in the past few months was because most creditors had allowed it to default. The government of President Hakainde Hichilema, who was elected in August, started talks with the IMF in early November. Zambia's external debt includes around $3 billion in international bonds, $2.1 billion to multilateral lending agencies such as the IMF, and another $3 billion to China and Chinese entities.
In our next story, South African rand slips but stocks ride a global rally. South Africa's rand slipped in the trade on Thursday, even as investors turn back towards riskier assets at the expense of the dollar and other safe havens assets. At 7 GMT, the rand traded at 15.7 against the dollar, 0.2% weaker than its previous close. Stock enjoyed a further boost in early trade, building on gains made a day earlier. Shares around the world have rallied in recent days as investors welcomed signs that the Omicron variant of COVID-19 might be less severe than feared, as well as other positive signals like robust U.S. economic data.
Kenya to replace nominal debt ceiling with 55% GDP share aim. Kenya aims to replace a nominal public debt ceiling with a debt anchor as a percentage of gross domestic product by the end of June 2022, Finance Minister Ukur Yatani said. The debt ceiling is set at $80 billion at present, the Finance Ministry said. In June this year, total debt stood at 70% of GDP. The letter did not set a time frame for when the debt level will be brought to 55% of GDP. In the letter that was made public on Wednesday, Yatani said the government would at the same time take over $827 million of national carrier Kenya Airways debt. It will also give the airline $473 million in direct budget support in the fiscal year that ends in June 2022. In addition to the money injection, Kenya Airways, also known by its abbreviation KQ, will have to undertake other measures to turn around its operations, Yatani said. KQ will be required to trim down its network, rationalize frequencies of flights, operate a smaller fleet, and rationalize its staff complement, he said. The government has a 48.9% stake in the airline.
The government is paying state CEOs millions of rands for maladministration, bad audits, and missed targets. The Automobile Association of South Africa says the parliament needs to review how chief executives at state-owned companies are paid, noting that these individuals are drawing salaries of millions of rands but are failing to deliver. The high remuneration of executives at state-owned enterprises remains a concern and should be the focus of a parliamentary inquiry in 2022, it said. This remains particularly true in several groups or entities within the transport sector, it added. The AA reviewed and Road Traffic Infringement Agency, the Road Traffic Management Corporation, and the Gautrain Management Agency, a provincial public entity in Gauteng, and found millions of rands being paid out to CEOs of these companies amid dismissal, adverse audits, and missed targets. In the case of the RTIA, its registrar and CEO was paid a remuneration packet just under 10.9 million rand in 2020, but was fired earlier this year of what the agency said was serious maladministration, the AA said. In the 2020-2021 annual report for the RTMC, the Auditor General noted that the management of the corporation did not ensure the financial statements were in line with the reporting framework and that they were accurate and complete. Yet in the same year, the CEO of the RTMC's total remuneration was 9.8 million rand in spite of adverse findings of the Auditor General. In addition, the RTMC has failed to fulfill its core mandate of reducing road deaths in South Africa despite receiving billions of rands from the government to address the issue.
All right, that brings us to the end of our economic news stories. Now, as we engage in hopefully responsible holiday spending, it's important to keep an eye on the markets. So let's have a look at the economic indicators up next. It's been an eventful and exciting sporting year, and we are grateful to Ari Hochad for talking us through it all. So here he is once again with some of the sporting action you can expect this festive weekend.
Yes, a very good morning. It's Friday morning. I'm here in Struisbaai, still in Gullis, the southern tip of Africa, and we're talking sport. It is Friday, and then we talk sport. Tomorrow is Christmas Day, so no sport on Christmas Day, but there's some sport on Sunday, and 2 cricket tests starting on Monday. And let's start with those cricket tests starting on Monday. It is the Proteas that will host India, and also it is Australia that will host England in the 3rd Ashes Test. First look at the game in South Africa. It is going to be played at Centurion, the first of 3 5-day tests. It is South Africa against India. And Captain Dean Elgar of the Proteas said the team is ready to play. It's going to be a tough series for them to play against India. But he was also saddened that there will be no spectators. Unfortunately, SA Cricket announced that because of COVID-19, no spectators will be allowed in the test on Monday at Centurion. Team news is that Andrich Nortje is out. He's the quick bowler. Andrich Nortje can't play, but it looks like Dwayne Olivier, who was played in the UK on a Kolpak contract, will be back in the team to replace Nortje. In Australia, it will be the 3rd Ashes Test, and it's Australia at the moment dominating against England. Australia won the first 2 tests, and the 3rd test, also starting on Monday, will be in Melbourne, the so-called Boxing Day Test. And team news from Australia is that Josh Hazlewood, the fast bowler, is still out injured. And Pat Cummins, the captain that was out because of COVID regulations for the 2nd test, he will come back into the team for the 3rd test in Melbourne. And on from cricket, we go on to some soccer news. There's the English Premier League that's going to be played, but there's also COVID-19 that's wreaking havoc also, unfortunately, in the English Premier League. Some games that can't be played over the weekend. But let's first look at the standing at the moment. It is Manchester City. After 18 games, they've got 44 league points. They're leading. And Manchester City, their next game will be against Leicester City. That will be at home for Manchester City. Second on the lock after 18 games is Liverpool, 41 points. But they unfortunately can't play against Leeds. They were scheduled to play on Sunday against Leeds, but that game was postponed because of 5 players that tested positive for Leeds coronavirus or COVID-19, and that game was postponed. Also postponed, Wolves playing against Watford. That's not going to happen. That was also postponed. Some of the games that's going to be happening on Sunday, still is Norwich that host Arsenal, and then 3rd placed Chelsea. They will be away to Aston Villa. And then on Monday, it is Newcastle that will host Manchester United. And from English Premier League, we go on to some tennis news, and there's the Australian Open that's going to start on the 17th of January. There's some news from the organisers leading up to the tournament in Australia that's going to be played in Melbourne. And news from Australian Open tennis is that Andy Murray, he will from England or United Kingdom, he will receive a wild card entry. Didn't play much the last few years. He had lots of injuries and operations, but the 34-year-old will play. He missed the previous 2 or 3 years because of injury. He's a 5-time runner-up, so Andy Murray says it's a big honour for him to play again in the Australian Open. Other news from the Australian Open is that Rafael Nadal at the moment is out because of also testing positive for COVID-19, but organisers say that they are confident that he will be able to join a very competitive field on the 17th of January. Also Novak Djokovic, there's uncertainty. He was very quiet about his status, his COVID-19 status or his vaccination status. He is keeping that private, and the organisers earlier indicated that all players and officials need to be vaccinated to be able to play in the tournament in Melbourne. So it is still to be confirmed if Novak Djokovic will be able to play. In the women's section, it seems like all the top seeds will be able to play. According to organisers, 85 of the top 100 women's tennis players are vaccinated at the moment. And the indication is also that in the men's section, there is 90 of the top 100 men that is also vaccinated. Now, from the tennis courts, we go on to some racing news. It is the Formula One racing that was very exciting this year. It was extremely exciting, Formula One racing. Also, some controversial races as well, some controversy also. But in the end, it was Max Verstappen that won the series, the championship in the end. But news from Formula One is that Ferrari announced today that it is Michael Schumacher's son, that is Mick Schumacher, that will officially be a test driver for Ferrari next year. So that is great news for Mick Schumacher, following the shoes in his shoes, racing shoes of father Michael Schumacher, who won 7 championships. And it's also as a test driver, he is also a stand-in driver to the regular drivers if something happened to them next year. He's also in line to race for Ferrari. But officially for next season, Mick Schumacher will still be racing for the Haas team. And he's still 22 years old, so gaining experience. So great news for Ferrari that Mick Schumacher is now an official test driver for the Ferrari team. But that's the sporting news for today. And have a great sporting weekend, but more importantly, have a very Merry Christmas tomorrow for everyone, all the viewers, and especially also to the presenters, very capable presenters, Ashman and Aina as well. Hope you have a very blessed Christmas, and with producer Aaron Svenska as well. We talk again next year when we talk sport again. Till then, God bless and goodbye.
For 306 shows, Africa Good Morning has been broadcasting live from 7 a.m., bringing you news and current affairs from Africa and beyond. Now, if you perhaps missed today's top stories at the top of the hour, or if you need a recap, worry not. Here are the headlines. Libyan election collapses with no plan out of crisis. Sudan's Prime Minister Hamdok intends to resign within hours, according to sources. Tigrayan fighters announce they are withdrawing from rest of Ethiopia. The bittersweet reality of intra-African migration. Zambia expects to agree debt restructuring with creditors by mid-2022. And more cricket news coming to you with regards to the Ashes. Those have been our stories.
We thank you very much for a fantastic year. Thank you very much for tuning in each and every morning, Monday to Friday. You are highly appreciated, and we wish you the best for the upcoming year and the best also within this festive season. We do welcome your remarks once again for the final time regarding our show. You can email them to us. Our email is agm_2cents@nmh.com.na, and we look forward to hearing from you. Alternatively, we are on Facebook and Twitter. That's at Africa Good Morning. Kindly do visit our website during your holiday. It's called One Up To, and you can catch up on everything that we've been up to during this year. We thank you very, very much. It has been a fantastic year broadcasting to you the news making headlines.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now the Shona say, "Wakawona na hawashaya." Those who have found each other never lose each other. So from Aina Raiza Koyo and Ashwin Berry, take care.